Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Student Insider podcast. I am joined, of course, once again by Alex. But today we have a guest. We are joined today by Tom Cockbain from ZeroGravity. Hello, Tom. Thank you so much for joining us today. Would you like to just introduce yourself and perhaps give a quick overview of what ZeroGravity is?
Yeah, so hi guys, thank you so much for having me on today. My name's Tom and I'm undergraduate talent lead at ZeroGravity. So we're essentially a startup with the mission of spreading talent around the UK. So talent from low income backgrounds into top universities and graduate careers. As undergraduate talent lead, I essentially work with our network of universities and students to build out the platform and support students along the way. But yeah, thanks for having me on today, guys.
No, yeah, thanks a lot for taking the time to come onto the podcast. That sounds really interesting. So I found about ZeroGravity when Luke mentioned it, and sounds like a really interesting mission that you guys are doing. What kind of in your role as talent? Was it talent lead? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, so I'm undergraduate talent lead, which essentially means like student recruitment in a really nice sense. So ZeroGravity was started by our founder Joe Seddon around 3 to 4 years ago, 2020 I believe, in Oxford. So Joe grew up in Yorkshire from a single parent family, like state school background, but was super engaged and went on to study Oxford PPE. But once he was there, he just realised like the access to sort of opportunity and the imposter syndrome that he felt was just so different to someone from like a private school background. So like this whole network advantage idea, where someone from a state school simply just doesn't have that same access to information, access to the sort of social capital that's going to support them on their way into university. So that sort of led to him to start up ZeroGravity, but at the time it was called Access Oxbridge. He, in true sort of tech startup fashion, he started Access Oxbridge with the last £200 of his student loan from his bedroom. And he essentially just built out a really simple platform to connect students at university with students from state schools and those that were really talented but just lacked that little bit extra, that information they needed to access Oxbridge. And that was really great in its first year. There was around 100 students that went through it. But since then, he realised that there was just so much potential to use technology to untap this potential around the UK, and that's what led on to ZeroGravity as it is today, which is now a fully fledged tech mentoring platform where students are connected with other students around the UK, just providing them support with personal statements and interview prep, all that sort of thing that's just going to help them get that extra 20% they need to get them on into university, to really give them that extra support. And since then we've had 3,000 students get to top universities, and 400 of those gone to Cambridge, and now we're looking on to the next stage. So once we're supporting these students into university, that's amazing, but we have the potential with this platform to support a student on their entire journey, so all the way through from university from A-levels onto graduate careers and on into life. ZeroGravity can be a part of their journey forever essentially, and really they can wear this mentoring and this opportunity as a sort of badge of pride. Like, coming from a background like Joe did doesn't have to be something you're ashamed of. It can be something you can be really proud of as you go through.
Absolutely, yeah, that's really interesting. I think it's really clever in terms of like how the mentoring sounds, because it's like people that have just gone through the process are mentoring those that are now going through it. So it's like they haven't done it a really long time ago. It's like it's when they've been like through it in the recent couple of years, so they really have like fresh in their mind of the experience of applying to university and going through that, like all the process, personal statements and.
Yeah, I think it's a huge thing, Alex, that I've noticed recently. We've all started mentoring ourselves with the platform, and I'm only a few years out of university myself, but I've already had to be like researching all the UCAS applications and everything again. So having someone that's just that next step up the ladder from you, and really just a little bit ahead, is really, really valuable, because they can give you the sort of best insight, and also it's so low effort. Like, once you've learned something from your side, that first learning state is really, really difficult, like learning your way around interviews through personal statements, all that. But once you know it, it's like second nature to you. So providing someone else that resource and that mentoring is just, it's a really simple thing to do.
Because I guess it becomes, just becomes like, just know it like the back of your hand, because you've been through it like a certain amount of times.
Yeah, second nature almost.
I have a quick question actually regarding, because you were giving a sort of Joe Seddon's story into it was Oxford, you said, right?
Yes.
And you mentioned a few things there that were sort of piqued my interest, and you mentioned the mentoring as well. And I think the first thing that was the network advantage and also imposter syndrome. So were those some of the things that, I mean, Joe, or maybe even yourself, struggled with in terms of getting to uni? Are they two big factors, and how does that play into the mentoring program that you provide at ZeroGravity?
Yeah, I think it's a huge one, Luke. Like growing up in a state school background or any background from that matter, you're bound to feel some level of imposter syndrome. This idea that you don't feel like you belong where you already are. So I've had it probably at every stage of my life, where I've just felt like, oh, I'm not quite. I don't really know how I got here. You know, I don't feel like I belong in this situation. Like you don't realise your true potential, because you're kind of stressed out by the current situation you're in. And that's exactly what Joe was trying to battle with ZeroGravity, is like these students are so talented in terms of their academia, but in terms of that access to information and that little bit extra, they're limited there. So that's where the imposter syndrome really comes in. It's around the sort of talent and opportunity and the balance between the two.
So would you suggest in that case that private schools, are they more encouraging to students in terms of combating the imposter syndrome, or is it also, interplay between?
Yeah, I think it's a massive interplay of all these things. Like, I don't want to generalize on any level, but naturally a student that goes to a private school will come from a higher earning family, where the parents have more likely been to a private school themselves, so will already have insight on the private school system, and then they'll have insight onto the university system from that, and insights onto everything beyond careers, and the former, latter, whatever. But also, I feel like from a state school background, you're really looking at not having as much access to information. I know personally, I went to a state school, and the resources and the information around university were just always barriers to me. Like, it would always be self-searching for these things, and going out to try and access open data yourself. Whereas I know that in a number of private schools that I've spoken to people that they attended, it was talking about Oxbridge from a very early age, from sort of year 11 onwards. That was sort of the premise of what the focus was going to be on. Like, are you going, are you not, sort of thing. Are you going to apply? And I know personally when I was in sixth form, there was a teacher that took two really talented students. Like, he took a Saturday to take them out to Oxbridge. He took them to Cambridge, I believe, just on a Saturday. And I feel like it's that sort of extra effort that you won't be getting at all state schools, and that's where the real difference there lies.
How do you feel that, like, is it like that in state schools? Would you say it's more like they try and reach more people with more opportunities, but then in private schools they're going more into are they pushing like that Oxbridge route? Do you feel like, hence that, like, because of the network history and all that kind of stuff that you mentioned?
Yeah, it's all about the quotas at the end of the day. Like, there's an expectation from private schools that a set number of students will go to Oxbridge or will go to higher tariff universities, whereas state schools, it's getting the grades to get students into university at all, and really support them on that journey. So if you can provide that extra insight, that extra opportunity for students to be mentored and to really boost their application, and that's something that's really beneficial.
So with ZeroGravity, do you feel like you guys will remain like in the online format, or perhaps like opt for some like in-person mentoring at some point for like schools in the UK?
Yeah, so the sort of premise behind ZeroGravity and the real idea there is that it's really scalability. It's really scalable on a geographic level. The typical programs we've seen around mentoring and supporting students from state schools with their university applications, they've been really brilliant, but they've been somewhat geographically limited to sort of inner city, suburban, urban areas. The thing with ZeroGravity is it's a tech platform, so it's incredibly scalable. We've had it grow from 2,000 to 5,000 students, all this sort of like growth in such a short space of time, because it's all automated. There's very few, relatively speaking, very few staff working behind the scenes to make it all happen. It's all running on algorithms, and so what we can do is allow a student from the Isle of Skye to connect with a student at Exeter, and anyone around the UK. We've actually got a map of all the mentees and mentors around the UK, and it's super widespread. Like the dots prick up just about everywhere, which is something that we want to continue doing. And so that's why we're going to keep everything online for now. But one thing we are really keen to do is build out a sense of community as well. Like one-to-one mentoring is fantastic, but I think we all know from the last few years that technology can be quite isolating, and it can impact you in a way that other things don't. Like from working online, from doing university online, there's a lot of like an isolating nature with that. And so we really want to build out a sense of community. So we've developed a community platform within ZeroGravity, but also on top of that, something I'm really keen to do is build out a community at universities, so that we can build networks of our students that are members at university, and allow them to information share, focus on their well-being, and really like bring our community together. So ZeroGravity is like a sort of membership club can continue to grow and continue to foster that community sense.
Yeah, that's really cool. 'Cause, I guess 100%. Like on the virtual thing, is that you can reach so many more people, because it's just like it makes that access like not limited to a certain like geographic location. So so that's really good, especially like what we can do with the internet these days. Really useful.
Yeah, it's something like 99% of students have access to a computer, a laptop, and an internet connection now. So the way we can reach like a huge demographic of people is completely different to how it was 10, 15 years ago.
Our next question is, at what stages in education I think you mentioned it was the A-level, around the A-level, so year 12, 13 would be in UK schools, is the target audience for ZeroGravity. And we were wondering why this stage of sort of education compared to maybe sort of earlier in GCSEs, or maybe before that. Why do you guys aim for the A-level? Why is the focus on A-levels?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question. Like that personally, I sort of have my own answer to this. I'm not sure how our founder Joe or other people might answer this one. But personally, I see it as like mentoring is something that's not introduced early enough. I think you have at that age group, you have tutoring and all these opportunities to help someone academically. But once you get into a graduate career and onwards, the big focus is on sort of coaching and mentoring, where you have someone who's the next stage up the ladder, as it were, and is really supporting you with everything that they were doing a few years back. And I think that's the premise behind ZeroGravity, is that there isn't that interplay between university and A-levels, whereas there is more of a sort of interplay between A-levels and GCSEs, for example, in a more academic sense. But there's less of a focus on the actual experience of applying for universities. And yeah, it all boils down to this next stage, next step up the ladder, as it were. And I think the current focus being on into university, providing a mentor at university that's going to support you with your application. But then the stage up from that is into careers, because we have all of this talent now at universities, like thousands of students that are supporting a student at A-level age, but there's nothing there to support them moving forward. So we're partnering with graduate employers to provide that same process with graduate mentors on the platform that can then support students at university on their journey forward. And it all comes down to this like one platform, one journey experience, really. I don't like little catchphrases and things, but I think that's the best way to package it up. Is it's one platform, one journey all the way through, and you'll just continue to have these like mutually beneficial mentoring relationships as you go into your career and you move forward. But then I think there's also scope moving forward, like into life really. Like, you support someone on their journey into university, that's great, they're talented. You support them into a career, but that's the first 23 years of their life. If you can start connecting them with graduates and career mentors that are at the next stage from there, then that's really, really important.
Yeah, I really like the idea of having a mentor at every stage of life. I think that having a mentor gives you something to look up to, in a sense. It's like someone that's in a position that you would like to be in. And I think that I saw how the ZeroGravity mentoring platform works, and it's like you're matched depending on your subject interests or university interests. Am I correct in saying that?
Yeah, that's the current premise of it all. It's based on your sort of academic profile. So the subject you want to study at the university you want to study, and then a few more smaller things at play, like looking into your actual your demographic and background. But that's actually something that I think could be made really, really sophisticated in the future. Having this algorithm that matches students automatically now is really great. But I think there's a real potential there to match students based on the similar life experiences. Like when a student signs up to ZeroGravity, we collect a range of data on their socioeconomic background, and I think there's a real potential there to match people of similar life experiences, because I think that can provide the most valuable mentoring relationships, is when you can literally see someone that mirrors your sort of life experience ahead of you, and you can really feel quite inspired by them and be supported by them in that way.
Yeah.
So with people coming to like ZeroGravity, do you feel like there's a lot of people coming and just like signing up, or is it like a lot of outreach from you guys to maybe like schools or just like students in general to for them to discover what like the opportunity that is there for them?
Yeah, it's a interesting question, Alex. Like, in its first few years of growth, ZeroGravity was pure organic. Joe started it with, sort of off the back of his student loan, and there wasn't money for outreach or gaining mentors on the platform. It was through people being like, I want to do that sort of altruistically. I want to support someone on their next stage. I'd love to do that. And at the same time, like, there's nothing more beneficial for your CV than like a voluntary experience. Like, we all know that. But a voluntary experience, which is something that you're very likely to be doing in your later life anyway, like mentoring, is something that's incredibly valuable. So I think there's also that side of it that students are really, really keen to engage with. We're now, as we grow, so to give some perspective on this time last year there were 4 people in the team at ZeroGravity, and we're now up to 24. So really starting to scale at some velocity now. And with that, my role comes with university outreach and student outreach. So I'm partnering with universities and working directly with students with like ambassador programs and building out networks at different universities. But also schools outreach. So my counterpart, Alex, he works and partners with over 300 schools now, I believe, to refer their students to the platform and bring in that new cohort of students, so we can really reach more and more each year.
I think that leads quite nicely into one of the questions that we had, and is how as you're reaching out to these universities, how do they seem to be responding, and is there any, I mean, maybe from your own university experience? I know that because I studied at King's College London, I know that they have their own principles in place to sort of widen participation. So I'm not sure if you could elaborate on that, if you could, please.
Yeah, universities have actually been incredibly receptive to what ZeroGravity doing. I think something that's quite important here is like we have a sign-up process and all this that's external to the university itself. So often when I talk to a university and I meet with them for the first time, there's a bit of a surprise when we've already got students that are signed up with ZeroGravity. But I've been having conversations with sort of access teams and careers departments and widening participation teams. And they all have like a mentoring process themselves, but something they're really challenged by is the capacity and the actual reach of their offerings. So a lot of the sort of matching process, for example, is done by one very hard-working person at the university who is going through different profiles and matching up a mentor with another student. And I think that's something that's limited them numbers-wise pretty much across the board. Regardless of the size of the university, it seems that they're limited to about 150 mentoring relationships. So something as scalable as ZeroGravity, where we can provide this automatic matching system, this easy sign-up flow for students, like a really easy way for them to get involved, is just a win-win for them. And we never see it as sort of stepping on the toes of what the university is doing. It's always supplementing their offering to students and just increasing their intake of diverse talent at the end of the day. But at the same time, we're really looking now to also support the graduate outcomes, because it's all well and good getting to university, but the next steps is something that's quite challenging often.
One of the things that I think I personally appreciated about the Zero Gravity program is just its ease of access, and also just the fact that it is free for students. I think it really does break down a lot of barriers, especially comparing my own experience, because I applied for medicine initially, and there was a lot of programs that were sort of circulating that were supposed to give you kind of the skills and experience that you needed for your personal statement for university, and also advice on the medicine admission tests. One of them, I think, is called 6Med, I want to say, was first kickstarted by Ali Abdul. I'm not sure if you're familiar. Yeah, so that's one of the programs that I signed up for. I can't remember the exact price, but I think that monetary investment is something that would put people off personally. So I really do appreciate that Zero Gravity is.
Yeah, I think it's a key part of the mission is that this is free for students forever. I think one of the big detriments within the space at the moment is that there shouldn't be a financial incentive behind social mobility. I think socially mobile talent is something that all sort of top employers are looking for, universities are now looking for, and there definitely should be a financial incentive behind that to really support it and facilitate it as it starts coming through. But I don't think that means at any stage that a student should be paying for it or paying for the privilege to reach the next level, because that completely destroys the idea of social mobility.
So, in terms of outside of the university education, do you think there is a gap in employment opportunities or access to the alternatives to university between students across the UK, which also needs addressing?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting one. I think in terms of outside of university education, there's a huge just misconception around career pathways anyway. I think one thing is that a student feels like you need to access the most sort of elite opportunities, like the top universities, the top careers that are very traditional STEM based. Whereas I think the most success I've seen, especially among my friends at this age, is where people have found what makes them happy at the earliest stage and really managed to succeed at that. So I think that misconception really needs to be broken down. You do not need to go through academia. You don't need to go through a banking grad scheme. You just need to find something that really makes you happy and really makes you feel fulfilled. And I know that sounds like a bit of a cliche answer.
What would you say for someone that is so obviously you want to find something that you enjoy, but what would you say for someone that's trying to figure out that step in terms of trying to find out what does make them happy? What any pieces of wisdom that you think that may have helped you that other people could also to try and figure out what they want to do next?
Yeah, I think a piece of wisdom would infer that I am wise. But I one thing that really helped me was just putting myself in a completely new environment. Going to university on my side was an incredible experience, but more than anything, I think it was putting myself in a new environment around new voices and new opinions that sort of diversified my look on life. And then the same, exploring very like abnormal opportunities. So I studied abroad in Australia for a year, and while I was there, I was just trying to earn money. But one of the things I did was like go out and do a door-to-door sales job selling solar panels, and I found that was actually like such an incredible experience just to get out there and start talking to different people and explore what I wanted to do in my life. Do I want to be a salesman my whole life? Probably not. But it was a great opportunity to sort of just like change things up a little bit and really see life from a new perspective.
Was there any barriers to you beginning that salesman role? Because I know for me especially, myself maybe 2-3 years ago would have been absolutely petrified of going door to door and talking with strangers that I'd never met before.
Yeah, the barrier was that I earned no money for about a month because I wasn't very good at sales. But other than that, I would say like, yeah, it's a challenging environment. Anything new you do, and like my own confidence would definitely have been a barrier at the start. But like it's similar to I think anything you do in life. Once you get into the flow of things and you build your confidence, you build your strength with something, you can make it your baby, as it were, and really start enjoying what you do.
Yeah, I think I believe that we just in general have to make a decision on careers way too early. And when you're in, I mean, even at the end of GCSE, you still have to make that decision to go into A levels and further study subjects. And you only get to pick 4, and then after that it's university, and those are 2 quite big jumps, and that's a lot of time that you're investing. And I think one of the things that I wish I would have known back then was not to jump into something thinking with the pressure of other people applying to uni and thinking uni's my only option is another big one. We spoke with 2 people from Not Going to Uni, which is at a company dedicated to sort of highlighting the alternatives university, and I think you mentioned briefly about that as well. But I think it's worth, as you mentioned, taking that time to find something that you do really, really enjoy before you go to university. And I think that is actually integrated quite nicely into the mentoring program at ZeroGravity, because I think one of the first questions that you ask the mentees is, are you sure you want to do this subject? You sort of have to pry into them and understand exactly what their interests are.
I think another thing is just subject exploration in general. Like a lot of our mentees come in with not that much information and understanding around what they want to do. Like when I was looking at universities, I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, but I knew I quite enjoyed science, and I knew that climate change was about to change the world, so I did environmental science. Whereas someone else would come in now, or if I'd come into the system now or come through ZeroGravity, I don't know if that would have been my direct choice, because someone may have influenced my decision, told me a little bit about what to expect with that, and just given me that support that I needed to sort of make a decision. But I think there's a misconception that any academic degree leads you down a particular funnel, and it is talked about a bit, but just because you did one subject doesn't mean you can't completely pivot and do something completely different. I spent 8 months in a grad scheme, decided it really wasn't for me, and then went into a social mobility startup. Like there's really so many opportunities out there, and you don't have to be like defined by the subject you studied at university.
No, I 100% agree. I think a lot of companies are very open to having graduates from a variety of backgrounds. I think STEM especially. I know a lot of law firms look for STEM graduates just for the sort of different perspective and different ways of calculating things. So yeah, if you are in a situation now where you are a bit lost in your career, it's always worth remembering that having a degree does open a lot of opportunities for you. And there's also that opportunity to specialize after you've done your degree. You can start a master's or a PhD and carry on that study in the sort of a slightly different field that can help you develop skills and push that career in a different direction for you.
Yeah, definitely. And I think people often go straight into those postgraduate studies like masters with that lack of direction that they had at university. But I know a lot of people that came out of university, did a few years in industry, and then went back into do a master's once they'd really decided what they want to do. Because at the end of the day, it's a massive investment, especially from someone from a low income background, that paying to do that master's or suffering through the sort of low income of a PhD that I know a few people are doing is, it's a big investment.
Yeah, so it's a big portion of your life, so you don't want to. And it's the same, I think, jumping into a university degree. It's 3 years. I mean, it does. I'm sure it's the same for you, Tom, but it definitely flies by when you're at university. You feel like 3 years go so quickly.
Indeed.
But it is still a lot of time that you're investing at university.
Yeah, without a doubt.
And like, especially, so like you were saying about how with a degree you can like go into really anything, because anything, like they don't really mind what degree you have. It's just a lot of opportunities. It opens more with them, like to some companies that are still limited by access in terms of if you have a degree or not. But there's also things like I've seen a lot of these days is like conversion courses in masters.
Yeah.
So like if you've done an undergrad in something and maybe you want to try something else and you want to go into a specific field and you might want to do a master's, is that they allow you to convert and get a master's in that with an undergrad in something else, which I think is pretty interesting as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think the conversion courses are brilliant. The ones I've come across a lot are the sort of biomed into medicine, which is quite a significant time investment, but it just shows that the opportunities are there to switch at any time. And yeah, I'd always say like get out into the world and see a bit of industry, and see like what the working world looks like to really get an insight into what you want to channel your time into.
Absolutely. Because I feel like it's when you study something, it's very different to when you actually do it. So for example, last year I was on my placement year, and so prior to that, obviously doing a lot of like, so I'm studying business management, and there was a lot of like obviously like theory in terms of like university, and then seeing the application of it is really interesting because you're actually seeing what you're learning about, and like and then going back into university and seeing that difference in terms of structure and like the way they teach it, in how you can learn things at different perspectives of theory versus practical, and then that helping you then see, okay, post-uni, what do I want to do? Do I want to do the same thing? Do I want to do something similar? Do I want to do something completely different? And I think that like I've said it like quite a few times over the last few weeks, is like if you can do an internship, like some internship or replacement, like I always say 100% do it, because you can really like learn a lot in between that time. Like even if after university, of course, there's not much of a difference. But I mean, like if you can do that in between, you can kind of like see a unique perspective.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's just getting that insight into some sort of industry is always incredibly valuable. Just out of interest, Alex, how much of after being in industry, how much of the degree did you feel was really valuable and applied to the industry?
Yeah, so my degree is in business, and I was working in marketing. So like my degree was more broad than my work. But I feel like it was very relevant in terms of like, so I had like a module in the first year that was like the way leadership worked in the organizations, and so different like theories in terms of how we're managing people. It's not something I really thought about until I was learning about it. I was like, that makes sense. Like you got to have like certain approach with like people management or whatever to make sure that organizations run smoothly, and then seeing that how like the organizations were running like good people skills and all that kind of stuff, like managing people well, was like, okay, that's good to see like the like cultures of the companies like doing things well. I was like, oh, that actually applies to business theory in terms of managing people. I was like, oh, okay, because I had like a call with, so like we had like 3 calls in the year with like someone from the business school, like catching up on the placement, and we had like one where it was like with the manager and stuff to like catch up, and then he was like, oh, I see a lot of like good business theory management there from your manager. I was like, it's like really interesting to think about how that actually does apply, which is why before I guess my mindset was more they're very two different things, like the theory and the practical is very different, and then after doing that I see more of a integration which maybe I wouldn't have seen before, because I was like, oh, okay, like it was just like having 2 different perspectives of the same world, because it's like, oh, university versus non-university, kind of theory versus practical. It's like, okay, there's more intertwining parts than than I thought there would be.
Yeah, it's good to see. It's good to see some of the theory is replicated in reality. I think quite often it's not, but I think also there's a lot of value, isn't there, in finding your own way with it and being creative with these things.
I think you'll always find that the skills that you learn at your degree are always a lot more valuable than the information you pick up. From my experience, I think that what you learn at university, you can very much teach yourself, and it's very much the skills of the assignments and the essays and everything that you're writing that really does matter. So it's worth definitely emphasizing what you're learning in terms of socializing with people, joining these societies, and put a heavy emphasis on extracurricular activities as well, I'd say, personally.
Yeah, definitely. I think depending on, obviously, medicine and healthcare subjects aside, I think the sort of content is less important for most subjects. It's mainly around like the skills you're developing, and as you say, the connections you're forming, and the way you're learning to interact with people. I think is hugely important. I've applied like a lot of what I learned and a lot of the skills I sort of developed, but it's a lot of sort of soft skills and general things, but you can see it coming through in your day-to-day life, whereas that's something that I don't think I saw coming through from my A-levels as such. Like maybe somewhat, but a lot of it is really translated now.
I think companies definitely pick up on that as well. As I mentioned a second ago, that companies do look specifically for graduates to join their company. I think it's because not everyone has what it takes to finish a degree, because it is obviously, I'm sure all three of us can vouch, it's not an easy thing, getting through third year especially. Yeah,
definitely. I think companies look for graduates, but increasingly they do look for more non-university students as well. Like through apprenticeships, I've got friends from home that didn't go to university that are absolutely smashing it now, and they've come through the apprenticeship system and have been incredibly successful through that. And I think that's really boils down to them just having that applied experience from day one, whereas we may have been a bit more slow and building up that sort of skills over time. They went straight in and just you learn on the job and really develop your skills there.
I have another question actually, because you mentioned that you did a year abroad in Australia. Do you have any advice for someone that would be interested in doing a year abroad, and the kind of takeaway lessons that you got from that, and also maybe the salesman work as well?
Sell solar. It's a good business in Australia because it's sunny.
Oh, of course. Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I would without a doubt say, do it. Like, I remember touring the universities and saying to my parents, like, yeah, I want to go here because they offer a year abroad. And they were like, okay, yeah, that's great, you're not going to do that. And then 2 years later, I was like scraping the grades to get onto that year abroad scheme. But, like, without a doubt, like, one of the most just self-building and insightful things I could have done for myself, like putting yourself in another country with a whole new group of people for a year is like sort of university on steroids. We spoke a bit earlier about how university is amazing for these new experiences and meeting new people and new ideas and that, but I think doing that in a different country is just like hugely important. And I think it's really important to mention that, like, financially it might be a struggle for a lot of people to perceive going to another country, but I personally found that, like, by working alongside my studies and with the increased student loan that the government give you for that year, you can manage it, and it is doable for people of all backgrounds.
Yeah, amazing. Some great bits of advice. I think it also highlights quite well that, even you mentioned that you were struggling a bit financially, having to start, a job on the side of university, but I guess because you wanted to be, studying abroad enough, you were willing to put in those extra hours to keep yourself sort of afloat financially. So it's quite admirable.
Yeah, you've got to do what you want to do.
Yeah, 100%. And you've mentioned a few times, Tom, about your own university experience, and I think it'll be nice just to see, because obviously it will link everything to do with Zero Gravity in the show notes, so that anyone listening can go and check that out, because I think it is a very exciting opportunity for students, and it'll. I think the statistics were saying that you're 40% more likely to get into top universities with the zero gravity mentoring. I think that was. That might be. Tom, correct me if I'm wrong.
No, that's completely correct. 40% more likely. It was a UCAS quasi study that was done last year, and we found our students were 40% more likely to get into top unis. And the statistic was a little bit higher for Oxbridge as well. But equally, I think at the same time, it's becoming more and more recognised by graduate employers now as sort of that experience on the CV. That's really valued. As like being a mentor at university is incredibly valuable as you start applying for these different positions.
Yeah, hopefully that gives some encouragement as well to some students out there that might be having that imposter syndrome that we brought up a few times. In that it's okay. I think it's good to push yourself, and when you're applying, you do have 5 options. So I think it's okay to have that one. You know what? Shot in the dark. Let's see if this works out. Let's apply to Cambridge, Oxford, or any other top university.
Some of the most amazing stories that have come through Zero Gravity are the ones of students that had applied to one university that was aspirational to them. So we had a student that applied to Durham from a Zero Gravity background, and he got his place, but he did really, really well in his A-levels, and because of the sort of confidence that his mentor gave him with Zero Gravity, he decided to go on, take a gap year, and then apply for Cambridge the next year. And now he's just started at Cambridge this year. So it's really breaking down those traditional barriers of imposter syndrome that we see.
Yeah, it sounds like confidence is quite a big factor in that case. Do you feel that in that individual case, I'm not sure how much you know about this story, but do you feel that there was enough potential for Cambridge initially during the application for Durham phase, or?
Yeah, I think it brings it full circle back to the whole talent is widespread but opportunity is not, and I think maybe counterpart to that, like talent is widespread but confidence is not. These students have just academically like insane, but even like leading up to those A-levels, they don't know what's going to come in that grade packet at the end of the day, but they're still a top-notch student that just needs that extra boost of confidence, that extra bit of support, and that mentor sort them on the way.
I think it would be interesting perhaps in future to interview someone that looks through the university applications to see what kind of things they prioritise when they're looking through someone's personal statement, because you mentioned experience a few times, and that seems to be really the big factor in someone that was looking through an application to see, is this student interested, and are they going to invest a lot of their time into this, and have they started showing the initiative? And you mentioned as well that experience gap, and some students not having as much access to these experiences that they can put on their personal statements.
Yeah, I think there's an experience gap definitely with the application to uni, but I think that gap lies truly in the application to graduate careers. There's such a gap between the opportunities available to students from low income backgrounds and those from sort of private school backgrounds, and through no fault of their own. It's just through the networks that they share and the opportunities that literally present themselves through family networks, through school networks. There's always going to be more opportunities to get more experience. Like I didn't know what a consultant was till last year. I think there's a number of people out there who probably feel the same way, whereas it might have been ingrained into a student from day one, like you need to go and do this placement with UI, or this year in industry with a top law firm. There's a bit more like insight there.
I think that emphasises one of Alex's points earlier as well about taking that industry year.
Yeah, without a doubt. I think they're also incredibly valuable. Or any experience you can get, like 2 weeks summer internships, like just stepping through the doors, meeting the people, seeing what the vibe's like in that company, can be really useful to yourself, but also really useful in your CV.
Absolutely. I think understanding the vibe of a company is huge in terms of like if you actually want to work there. Because like you might have been like you've gone through your whole process of university, whether with this aspiration to work in one of these like big companies in like a certain industry, but then you just might realise you don't match that company vibe at all, and then you realise that you've had like without actually getting an insight to what it's like you it might not be what you want to do. And that's why I think like you might realize, oh, I might prefer working at a smaller company or a startup, or maybe I thought I wanted to do that, but actually a bigger company would be for me. Or like that's like trying different things and working on different projects and with different people and companies can really help students with understanding what they want to do.
Yeah, it's a super important point, Alex. Is like the culture of a company is really not just important to like the employees as a whole, but important to you, because there'll be a culture and a sort of progression track with one company that may not match another, but it may still match someone else's like personal preference. So, for example, from my side, going into a graduate scheme, I found that the culture there perhaps wasn't for me. There was less younger people around. There was more like focus on the sort of 9 to 5 element and the peaks and troughs of workload in the culture there. Whereas with a startup, it is sort of balls to the wall, as it were, all the time, and very like young, vibrant, and dynamic working environment. But at the same time, there are less opportunities for formal training. There's less opportunities for like clear progression tracks, and for someone who's looking for a very safe and secure job line in the next 4 to 5 years, that's a startup really wouldn't be for them. So it's important to look at these different things and think about what you're looking for from your career. Are you looking for the 9 to 5 with a steady progression and like some really good training opportunities, or are you looking for a smaller, more dynamic, seeing the impact of your work is something else that I think really is really significant about a smaller or startup size company. You will literally see day to day like your work reaching the end user or the customer or the client, whereas with a large company there may be 6 to 7 levels of approval there to get that out.
Absolutely, yeah. Like so for example, at university, they tend to, with talks, they have like a lot of big companies come in, and you see like a lot in general. They tend to push like, oh, work at this massive company that's huge, basically because it's like, oh, it's very safe, right? But I think it's also interesting to consider, like we were saying, like smaller companies, because like, so for example, the company I worked in for my placement year was quite a small team, and actually seeing like the actions that I'm taking is how it's impacting the business basically was really interesting, because like there was maybe like 20-25 employees in the company, and then having like chats with the managing director, like which you wouldn't usually have as an entry level job in a massive company. That wouldn't happen. Like you might have like one chat in the whole year or your whole time there, like maybe when you first join, like, oh hi, nice to meet you, and that might be it. But like working in a smaller company, you see those like what they things they introduce it, like they think like they're more open about what the business is happening, like what you're seeing, what's growing, what are the new ideas that they're starting, and that probably wouldn't be told to people in entry level roles in bigger companies, because it's more like, this is structured, this is how it works, this is what you do. If you want to go to the next position, you've got to be here for X amount of years and do
yeah. I think that's the point, is it's like tick this box to get to the next level, and that's quite often that progression is more sustainable. But at the same time, it's quite exciting to see to be part of like the overall company strategy and really see your impact and your sort of role within that.
A lot of people that I've spoken to have recommended, especially at university, is to try and join some sort of startup or student-based startups even, because I think that joining a big company, your objectives and your responsibilities are very written very, very sort of rigidly and very clearly. It's like, your job is to do this, to keep a big system working. But I think in a startup, it very much develops a lot of flexibility, in that you'll find yourself doing a load of different tasks that you didn't expect yourself to be doing, just because the team is so small. And I think it's a lot more dynamic.
Yeah, I think the way I'd put it is like to be in a big company is a small fish in a big pond. But to be in a startup is to be like, a kettle in a pond. It's just it's just ridiculous all the time. Like it's a crazy experience.
I thought I misheard you for a second when you said kettle.
Like, I may have scrambled for something to say there, but like, the idea is that you you're in an environment that's like incredibly dynamic, and you're not sure which way you're going to be pulled from day to day, and there aren't the same boxes to tick to grow as that fish, as it were. That was a terrible analogy.
I think we'll stick with that. We'll use that in future. We've made a new way of describing kettle in a pond.
Oh dear.
No, it's interesting though. But yeah, I guess wrapping up, and this was the question that I was proposing earlier. I think we got a bit sidetracked. Is Tom? Obviously, you've been. I think it was at university. It was. I can't remember which one it was that you went to. You have to remind me.
Leeds. Yeah.
Leeds. Yeah, that's the one.
Leeds.
As you've had your own university experience and outside of ZeroGravity, is there any advice that you could give to someone that's at that A-level stage, or maybe even to yourself, back when you were at your A-levels, just to say, any words of advice for someone that's maybe feeling a bit of imposter syndrome or has a lack of motivation or a lack of mentors in their life?
I think if I could look at myself at A-level age and say something now, it would be like it's going to get like a lot easier but a lot harder. Like the best advice I could give is just to keep trying new things and keep exploring new opportunities, and they don't have to be academic, they don't have to be professional, they can be friendship wise, they can be like people you meet, and like sports, extracurricular activities, starting a podcast, joining a startup. Like just try something new, and don't be afraid to reach out to someone on LinkedIn and be like, I want to know what you do. I want to explore this. Yeah.
Awesome.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
So before we finish up, is there any like big updates from ZeroGravity? And is the website the best place to point our listeners that are interested?
Yeah, website's best place to go. That's where you sign up. You just click apply now. Takes 5 minutes. Big updates wise, we've got our first HSBC Career Accelerator program launching. So that's like a 16-week program where current students can get a career mentor at HSBC to provide them support with their applications, or just exploring like careers in banking and finance, but also careers in general with HSBC. I think people think banking, finance, HSBC, but there's so much more to that business. There's HR, there's marketing, there's so many opportunities there. So yeah, that's starting soon, and a lot more sort of career opportunities coming along with ZeroGravity in the future.
Yeah, awesome. And you mentioned as well, there's some graduate advice that might be coming and mentoring down the line for ZeroGravity as well. So even if you're not in your A-levels or you're in a university stage, it's always worth having a look and getting involved. You can also be a mentor for ZeroGravity as well, so that's something you can do.
Yeah, definitely. I like the word members, not mentors now, in a way. Like I think as we grow and change as an organisation, a student joining ZeroGravity is gaining so much more than just mentoring. Like that's amazing, but they're now part of this community of mentors, a community of members at university that are getting access to these new opportunities from A-level through career through life, hopefully.
Yeah, no, I really like the idea of sort of setting those spores at different university and then letting them sort of flourish, and hopefully setting up some little like micro communities of ZeroGravity members at universities, which will hopefully spread the word faster so that people can get involved.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely.
Awesome. Yeah, so just before we end, we like to ask a few rapid fire questions. Does that sound good, Tom?
Given my analogy earlier, no.
we can give you 5 minutes if you need to refresh.
Yeah,
okay.
Let's go for it.
All right, awesome. I'll go for the first one. So, one of your favourite films of all time?
It is Tenet.
Nice choice.
Interesting. Okay, one book you would recommend to others to read, fiction or non-fiction, and why?
I'm actually sat right next to it. It's called Never Split the Difference. It's written by an ex-essayist guy about basically sales and negotiating and talking to people.
Interesting.
If you could have a billboard with anything on it, what would it be and why?
Ooh, that's a really good one. A billboard with anything on it. I would probably have an interactive billboard where you can meet someone on the other side of the world.
Wow.
That is a very
That's
interesting. Yeah, it's an interesting answer. We've not heard that before. Usually, people just opt for just a message of some sort. I like that. And the last one is: if you could have dinner with any 3 people, dead or alive, who would it be and why?
Nightmare. I would probably go for. Damn, this is a difficult one.
You can go for one if it's a little easier.
I think for 3 people, I'll try and do 3 people for you. And I'd probably say the dead or alive thing always gets me about this.
Opens the opportunities up a bit more, doesn't it?
It opens the opportunities up to so much more. I'd love to have dinner with. Sorry, I've lost it. Oh dear.
Honestly, you can take all the time you need. We can edit little bits and pieces out if you need.
This quick fire has become not quick fire. I'll just wait here for 20 minutes and do some research.
It's just like slow roasting, you know.
Yeah, it's a long dinner. Right, come on, Tom, you can do this. Who do I really respect?
Is there any books that you've read recently that might inspire the authors, or maybe a film, or celebrities?
Yeah, so I think one person I'd have there is Taika Waititi, who is the film director behind a few films recently. He's a Kiwi guy that's just absolutely hilarious. I think would be a good vibe on a dinner. I think I'd also quite like to have Michelle Obama there, partly because I really respect her. I think she's absolutely incredible. Might be a bit apprehensive around her, but I think that dynamic between her and Taika would be quite funny too. And then the final one, we've got to get a curveball in there. So Graham Norton's got to be there. He's got to be everywhere. And if I start slacking on the conversation, he can take over.
I really like the fact that you've considered how the other guests would interact with each other rather than your own interest talking to them. I really appreciate that. Actually, that's really funny.
Yeah, it's got to be a good dinner party.
Yeah. I think Michelle Obama has a podcast. Actually, I think I brushed past it on Spotify.
Yeah,
I'm not sure. I'll have to start listening to it for
pretty
something
good
good.
one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've not actually listened to it myself, but yeah, I should definitely try that one out.
Mm.
Okay, great. Yeah, great answers. Thanks a lot, Tom, for taking the time out of your day to join us on the podcast. Really appreciate it. Yeah, thanks a lot for listening, everybody. Any final words? And I'll do my final spiel at the end.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for having me, Alex and Luke. It's been awesome. Yeah, cheers.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Awesome. So thanks, everybody, for listening to the podcast episode. This was with ZeroGravity, Tom from ZeroGravity. And yeah, if you did enjoy it, please rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast, especially on Apple Podcasts. It's good for the algorithm, all that stuff, to push it out to more people. If you're listening on audio platforms such as Spotify or Apple Podcasts, we are also available on YouTube for the video version, and then we're also available on all audio podcast platforms as well, if you want to check us out on any of them. And we've got all our social platforms linked in the show notes as well, and we'll have the link to ZeroGravity and stuff in the show notes as well, and some things that we mentioned and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, thanks a lot for listening, everybody, and we'll see you in the next one.
See you in the next episode.